Welcome. This is a follow-up to my last video where I talked about stage models of adult development. And you might find that video interesting, but I don't know if it's necessary to be able to understand this video. And I want to say here also that whether or not stages are the best way of understanding adult development, it's worth recognizing that we can grow as adults, as individual humans, and that we all are going to benefit from any of us growing as an individual. Each of us, I'm going to benefit, people around me are going to benefit, and also the culture is going to benefit as well. So in this video, I'm going to talk about why personal development is important and relevant to this whole thing. And then I'm going to talk about some strategies for personal development that are kind of interesting and fun in certain ways. So why is it important? Well, if we want to create or co-create the Omni-Win future, we're going to have to be doing collaborative communication. We're going to have to be engaging in democracy that is creating win-win outcomes. And we're going to have a culture that is based on interdependence. And all of those things are going to be easier to create and experience if we have certain capacities and abilities. So the first one is we need a capacity to live in complexity. We need to let go of our need for simple answers because they don't actually exist, and then actually develop the resilience to live in complexity and nuance and face these wicked problems and also be in an ever-changing reality. We really need a capacity to live with and embrace paradox if we're going to be able to understand the important issues that we're facing as a society. We also need a greater capacity to interact with differences and to see dignity in the people that we otherwise might see as enemies, and then actually be able to understand that we are bound up with them, we are interdependent, and we're all on the same team. And the last part we need is we need to increase our ability to face our own flaws, to take criticism, and actually have an ability to change our mind when we find new information, and have the ability to separate kind of what we believe and think from our own identity. If we're able to do that, then all of these things are going to give us the endurance to engage in the ongoing process of growth and development as a society and culture. There's another reason I think this is important, and this comes from Robert Kegan, who's kind of the father of adult development theory. And he, points out that the older we can grow, the more that we can develop, and we can actually develop into self-transforming people, which actually will create capacity for humanity to become self-transforming. So I'm not going to try to put words in his mouth too much. Go ahead. Here's a video I'm going to show you, and the link for this clip is below, and it's part of a greater talk that you probably might enjoy as well.
What if we are living longer so that we can create more of the order of consciousness that may actually save us from the peril in which we live? What if we're living longer in order to increase the chances that our troubled species can find non-murderous, non-catastrophic, non-annihilative, non-poisoning ways of dealing with the extraordinary dangers of our third-order tribal passions and our fourth-order prideful sovereignties of thought and state? What if we are living longer in response to Einstein's challenge that we'll never solve the problems tomorrow with the same order of consciousness we are using to create the problems of today? What if we are living...
Thank you, Robert Kegan. This is really amazing to think about. Maybe if we could all develop ourselves as individuals, we can actually help transform society and rescue ourselves from all the huge issues. So how do we develop ourselves as individuals? I'm going to talk about this in kind of a couple different ways, but on the big picture, we need to develop awareness of ourself, both kind of who we are, what's good about us, and what our strengths are. And we also need to expand our awareness of others as well. So developing self-awareness. The first thing that we need to pay attention to is actually getting really good at being who we are. And there is an idea that we have to master whatever stage of development we're in, because that's the only thing that's going to allow us to progress to the next level. So we have to master where we are before we can move on to the next level. Now, in order to do this and kind of become aware of kind of who we are or where we even are at this time, there's a couple important questions. One of them is, what do you value? Another one is, what do you think or what do you believe? And the third one is, what do you want? And there's a bunch of really cool tools and exercises that you can do to kind of help you really wrap your head around these different things. So I'm going to actually take you on a tour of some of those, and let's see what we got. So first of all, the question is, what do we value? There's a character exercise at the Developmentalist, and you can go here, and I'll put all the links available to you. But in this exercise, what you do is you end up creating a portrait of the good. And this is a portrait of what you consider to be good in the world. And you start by figuring out what your goal is. And then you talk about who are your people, who is important to you, and what are the different groups that you're part of that help form your identity. And then you talk about what is the transcendent stuff in your life. What is the stuff that you consider to be more important than yourself, or things that you might even be willing to give your life for? And then you develop your virtues. And in this place are bases off the 7 virtues, but you get to actually define the language for each of them. And these end up becoming a bit of a guide of like, what is important to you? What are the virtues that define yourself, your personal character? So that's a really cool exercise. I encourage people to check it out. Another one is to actually explore what your standards of integrity are. And this is a really simple exercise that you can do. And basically what you do is you end up, and the instructions are all here on the website, but basically you make a list of the people you admire, then you make a list of all the qualities that they have, and then you look at those qualities, and those are the things that you actually consider to be important. And then those become the standards of integrity in your own life. These are the things that you admire and strive towards, and you can then actually measure your choices based on whether or not they're in alignment with your own sense of integrity. Another exercise comes from Brene Brown, and it's called Living into Our Values. And in that exercise, you basically, there's a PDF that you can download over here, and then you look at this list of values, then you look at them, you can maybe find 10 that are your most important values, but the goal is to actually distill it down to just 1 or 2 values, the 2 things that are just the most important with you. And then there's some really great questions to help you explore, what are the things that support those values? What are the things that you do that are not in alignment with those values? And kind of really think about, like, what does actually living into that value look like? So there's a bunch of great questions that'll help you understand this and think about it. So the next question that we want to think about is, what do you actually believe? And there are some other really fun models to think about this. And so one of them is, again, from the Developmentalist, and it's a worldview questionnaire. And this questionnaire will give you a chance to sort of ask a bunch of questions about various issues, and you kind of decide, like, what is the most important thing? Like, what do you value most? And it's kind of an interesting thing to sort of prioritize what you agree with and what you don't agree with. And then that ends up kind of helping you understand what your worldview is. And then you can sort of see, where that fits into the bigger developmental. Another developmental model that I mentioned in the last one is the idea of spiral dynamics. And at the link that I'll also share with you below, you can take this really great self-assessment, and you basically go here and you make a copy. And then once again, you will kind of rate on like the 0 to 6 scale or 7-point scale, just like how much you believe in these things at different levels. How often is something important to you or not important to you? And then you can score yourself and find out what your spiral dynamic theory is. So another Another tool that I think could be really interesting is the political compass test. And this is a test where you can actually figure out like what is your political ideology. And it's a little more complex than just being Democrat or Republican. There's a nice little quiz here that you can take. And then you have being able to map yourself onto this political compass map. And which is actually like a whole grid. And then you can learn more about the different kind of what it means to, have that certain political worldview. And then the third important question that need to be happening or that can explore is actually what do you want in your life? And one of the things that I found to be really helpful to help out with this is something called the self-authoring course. And you can find it at selfauthoring.com. And it's created by the famous, infamous Jordan Peterson, well before he became famous and infamous. But basically, it's a way of writing the story of your life. And the future authoring is the one that I've done myself, and it's really interesting. And it becomes a process where you can actually, step by step, imagine what is your ideal future. And then you can imagine also what future you want to avoid. And then you get to set goals. And then you get to actually start engaging in the process of just like picking one thing to change or improve. Now, since then, he's also created the past authoring and the present authoring. And let me tell you a little bit more about that. So, so we're trying to develop who we are as a self. And, as we're moving along, actually, Jordan Peterson has this great piece of advice is don't compare yourself to other people as they are today. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. We're trying to just do incremental process, right? But sometimes we run into things that hold us back. We get stuck in certain ways of thinking. We are either stuck in harm or trauma and so forth like that. And so in that kind of process, we might need to do some sort of shadow work and kind of find out what are those shadow voices or those monsters in the back of our mind that are undermining our growth? Or we might need to do some healing. And so in the self-authoring suite, the past authoring work has a really interesting exercise where you basically go and find the stuff that really haunts you from the past, the stuff that really is holding you back, and you actually write it down. And so whether or not you do the suite, if you have something that's really a hard experience, something that keeps on making you feel sad or angry or resentful from like deep past in your life, the advice is to write it down in as much detail as possible. Describe exactly what happened, what you did, what other people did, what did it smell like, what did it look like. And by getting it out of your head and onto paper, that itself can be a hugely therapeutic process. Speaking of therapy, therapy is a great idea. Find someone to talk to about it. I also would really recommend the work of going through a 12-step program if that's something that's useful for you. It doesn't just have to be about alcohol or marijuana or drugs. It can be about codependency or sex addiction. There's all sorts of different 12-step programs, but it's a wonderful process to help you assess what has gone on in your past and help you clear out the things that are haunting you in your mind. And personally, I'll say men's work has been really helpful for me. There's also a lot of great women's groups out there, I'm sure, but the new warrior training adventure done by the Mankind Project is a massively transformational process, and I would highly recommend that for anyone who's interested in getting a slingshot into personal growth. Whatever it is, once you've been doing your self-assessment, be you. Try to go as deep into being you as you can. Once you know your values, live into those values. Once you have a sense of what you want to see in the world, go and set goals and see what it's going to take to get there. When you have beliefs or thoughts, go and find the evidence, back it up, go deep into being yourself. In a certain way, become an expert at being you. And as you do this, also try to notice what's not working, what's working. And that is actually going to be really important work because all of us are inadequate. None of us have the shit figured out yet. And so when you're being your most authentic self or truest self, notice what's working and what's not. Where are the places I keep stumbling? What is not making sense about the thing, about my world? And be humble in that process. Start opening to the possibility that you might not have all the answers, because none of us do. And honestly, this is a crazy, mysterious world. If anyone thinks they have it all figured out, they probably haven't quite figured it out yet. And once you start recognizing that there's still room for growth, there's always room for growth, take responsibility for that. Take responsibility for your own learning and growth. And if you think that you do have it all figured out, and there's probably nothing you can change, but you're still interested in human development and want to see if you can improve, go ask for some feedback. Ask someone, can you see any room for growth in my life? Is there anything that I'm missing? Is there any advice that you would have for me if I want to become a better person or a more inclusive person? Ask someone you care about. They probably will have a good answer for you. All right. So that's our own personal work. But another kind of personal work that's important is developing awareness and understanding of all the different perspectives and communities and cultures and ways of being that are going on around us. So if it seems like you're like everything is really easy in your life, and I want to remind you, and I said at the beginning of the last video, that culture is a magnet. And the people who are around you, if they're thinking the same way you do, it will start to look like that's just the normal way of being in the world. And so when you're observing someone on the news or in some other place, and you're going to be like, what are they thinking? That's not the way to act in the world. That actually becomes an opportunity for you to start learning something new. And that could be a really interesting thing to follow. So another way to engage in your own personal development is to break out of that bubble. And you can do that, one, just by reading different news sources, exposing yourself to other ways of thinking, taking classes on topics that you never really thought about. Go check out a book or something like that about whatever's going on. But it can be really interesting for you to think about, like, who are those people? I don't know if I understand them. I don't like those people. I don't trust those people. I don't want those people to be part of the United States or to be part of my neighborhood or part of those things. Go meet those people. Learn about them. Find out about their culture. Find out what it is that they value. What do they believe? What do they desire? Invite them out for coffee. Spend real time together. And it's not just adequate for you just to expose yourself to other people and other ways of being, because that might just affirm whatever your assumptions are of them. You have to really learn about them enough until you can really understand like the true underlying dignity of that other person. One of the best ways to do that is by doing some really good, deep listening. And I'm going to share also in the links and all the millions of links here, exercise on what good listening is about. It's one of my own things that I put together. But I'm also going to now turn it over to Daniel Schmachtenberger, who has what he calls Rule Omega. And I think it's really great and helpful. If all of us were doing this, it could be a really interesting, neat, transformational thing in our culture. So let's check it out.
If you say something that sounds ridiculous to me, or batshit crazy or wrong, I actually give the benefit of the doubt that you might have a reason that I didn't understand first. So rather than just default into you're probably wrong, I'll ask more questions. And that giving the benefit of the doubt that you actually might have something useful to say increases my making sure that I understand you before I'm responding. And that actually, and the disagreeing with something that you weren't even saying because I didn't seek to understand well enough, creates very turbulent flow rather than laminar flow, breaks down coherence.
Thank you, Daniel Schmachtenberger. It's really important. And I just want to say, this is something I do in my own life. If I find myself feeling confused about what's going on in a conversation, or I start feeling really emotional or activated by what someone is saying, or I see the other person getting really emotional and activated, the best response in these kind of situations is just to start asking more questions. Try to understand what they're saying. Recognize that emotional experience repeat back what you're saying and repeat back what the other person is saying and try to figure out what it is until you both agree that you understand it. Because then once you actually understand what's going on, then you can actually respond to the world around you in a much more effective way. And you're going to grow as an individual because some of this is going to maybe challenge your reality. All right, so we're still moving along. So there's lots of different ways to development. So we talk about working on our own self and getting to know ourselves. There's also getting to know other people. And now I'm going to share with you some other popular options for developing ourselves and transforming. So, real basic one here, and this is kind of a fun one, is just go learn something new. Break yourself out of your routine and go take a course or go find a local college and take a class there, or try to find some skill you want to learn, or learn how to play an instrument or learn how to play a language. Go join some meetup group or something online or whatever it is. Go find something that you don't know anything about and go learn about it. And, you know, this could be really fun and interesting, but just that kind of growth in our mind and exposing ourselves to other people and experiences can be really transformational. Another sort of like quick trick to developing ourselves, and this is also related to therapy and so forth like that, but you don't have to have a therapist to do this, is actually to share your inner reality and thoughts with other people. And this isn't just like go have a great conversation with someone, but find someone who you trust and share with them the hard, the painful, the uncomfortable, the confusing thoughts and feelings, and ask them to just listen to you and, you know, try not to be afraid of their response. But if we engage in dialogue with other people, then our understanding of our own experiences grows. So that can be in therapy, it can be in some sort of support group, but go and share what's going on in your own mind with other people and see what happens. Now, there's this other category that I found to be really interesting, and I was like researching personal development, and I have a couple good articles that I'll share about this as well, where I got some of these. Is they find that the people who really get to a place where they become truly self-authoring and self-transformational, or really become able to hold massive amounts of complexity, most of them have had a self-transcendent experience. And this is a kind of experience where you've broken yourself out of your day-to-day concerns, and your sense of self and kind of your own identity disappears for a little bit, and you connect with something that's bigger than you. This actually happens sometimes to soldiers or people who face like a life-threatening, life or death experience. At the moment where they're not sure if they're going to survive or not, they kind of click into another way of being. But I highly don't recommend you going and trying to find a life-threatening experience. So what are some easier ones you can do? Something is just meditation. Actually, that's exactly what you're doing in meditation, is letting your regular thoughts kind of disappear a little bit. Another is to actually engage in a creative project. And because when we're doing something that's creative, we're engaging in something that doesn't exist yet. And so we're actually creating space for something that's new and possible. And if you're saying, I'm not creative, I can't do art or anything like that, I highly recommend The Artist Way. And it's a book that has like a 12-week process and invites you to do things like journaling and then going out and having different kinds of experiences by yourself. And these kinds of experiences and the whole process is actually really transformational. And just while I'm mentioning journaling, that can be really useful. We've talked about writing before, but again, getting the thoughts out of your head and in somewhere else creates space for you to have new kinds of experiences. Now, another very popular and don't say that you heard it from me kind of experience is psychedelics. And there's a way that people who have had psychedelic experiences tend to have a very much develop a capacity to see themselves connected to something bigger, able to hold a wider perspective, and also kind of be able to hold greater complexity and different perspectives in the world. So important trick there is make sure you have the right mindset and the right setting. You're in a safe place to do these kinds of things. There's all sorts of people these days that you can do this with professionally. And if you're wondering if this makes any sense at all, I highly recommend you check out the book by Michael Pollan called How to Change Your Mind. And if you just want something a little more garden variety, a really great way to sort of get yourself a self-transcendent experience is to go spend some time in nature alone. And I'm not talking about just a little bit of a hike, but like go camping for a couple of days by yourself. And the part of the secret of this is not bringing your phone, not bringing any other things, unplugging yourself from society and actually allowing yourself to get bored for a while can create tons of space for growth. And if that feels uncomfortable, then that's a really great way to consider that. So, whoa, there's a bunch of great ideas about how to engage in personal development. I'm going to kind of wrap us up now by saying, first of all, you don't have to do any of this. If you are not interested, I'm really interested in hearing why you watched this whole video, but I do want you to know that this is your choice. You don't need to develop or grow for anyone else. And this is your own choice, and actually claiming the choice to say, I like myself just the way I am, and I like the way my life is right now. And if it's working for you, that is awesome. Another reason why you don't need to do this is because all these cool processes and structures and frameworks that I'm talking about in the rest of this Omni-Win project are really great because they can actually hold people at all the different levels of development that we're at. And so wherever you are, be where you are until it's not working for you, and then remember that you're welcome to grow. This process is a lifelong journey. There is so much more that we can learn, and actually the more you know and the more you learn, then the more you're going to realize that you don't know everything, and that actually can be really exciting and less scary as you go along, because it's a whole bunch of amazing things to grow into. And as far as I can tell from the most advanced people, they say that there's not an end to this process. You can keep on developing and becoming a more amazing version of yourself that's more adaptable to the world around you and has a greater sense of who you are forever. And that's pretty awesome. So anyways, if you end up trying any of these processes or approaches, I would love to hear what happens or what you think. Thank you for watching this. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about how do we develop our thinking skills and our sense-making skills. And fortunately, a lot of the sense-making work is knowing yourself before we do it. So we've covered some of that. So we're going to talk about how to understand the world and, think a little bit more effectively about all the crazy information that's going on in the world. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a wonderful day.